Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. We'll be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 295 with Dr. Evan Kropp from the University of Florida. This builds upon our conversation in last week's episode. Definitely recommend you check out that one with Eric Wang from Turnitin, but this one with Evan, continuing to explore AI in the classroom and sort of its impacts across a lot of different disciplines. Evan coming from journalism, communication background, but obviously every industry is sort of grappling and kind of interfacing with AI and how it's going to supplement and augment folks' work. So, obviously we're owing it to our students to, teach about AI, and with AI, it's a great resource and tool to make teaching more efficient and effective. But then we also need to kind of embed it into the kind of content and concepts that we're teaching as well. So appreciate Evan jumping in the fray here and helping us navigate all this new stuff going on with AI in the classroom. So definitely connect with him, keep the conversation going, and please do enjoy this episode number 295 with Dr. Evan Kropp. So I'm really glad that we got introduced. I know I get a lot of great folks that sort of come across my email inbox that have a lot of great things to talk about, but I'm excited to have you on, Evan, to talk about how to teach with AI and about AI and all those sort of different dynamics. And I know it's helpful for me because I think getting into more of the sort of teaching and learning side of all of this, of higher ed and how it's sort of interfacing with AI is very interesting to me. It's sort of a wide, new, open world for me. It's not really something that's in my background. So I know folks listening, I think will learn as much as I do from this episode. So I appreciate you coming on. If you want to just briefly share a bit about your background and your current role at the University of Florida.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation. I am a second career professional in academia. My first career was in the professional realm. I started in sales and marketing after I completed my bachelor's degree. And as the internet started to become a thing, I shifted into internet marketing, which eventually really grew my interest not only in the internet, but in learning. And I did some reflection on my career and the direction I was taking and decided sales and marketing are great, but I'd actually like to go into higher education. I'd like to give back. I'd like to work with the next generation of employees. So I went ahead and got my master's degree, my PhD degree, both in the field of communication. I also have some graduate certificates in higher education leadership, management, teaching and learning. I've used those as an assistant professor. I have been the associate dean at Southern New Hampshire University for their communications program, and I am currently the executive director of distance education at the University of Florida, specifically in the College of Journalism and Communications, where I oversee the undergraduate programs for our college and the full entrepreneurial activities for our online graduate program, which includes admissions, advising, hiring faculty, training faculty, curriculum oversight, and a lot more fun stuff like that.
Yeah, I think, it's just great to have you on because I think just, very unique background, and I appreciate sort of how wholeheartedly you kind of embraced, coming into higher education, having it be your career and all the kind of credentials and things that you got and everything. So I think it is that idea of unfortunately, obviously, they're bringing like really great stuff. Like you have faculty who kind of just have like so much subject matter expertise, and they come in and they're not really like super knowledgeable maybe about like higher ed, its history, student development, or teaching and learning, whatever else. They maybe just kind of have to pick up, stuff along the way. But I think that there are just a lot of great opportunities for folks out there to learn how to teach and, how students learn, like all that kind of stuff. So that was just cool to hear you kind of speak on that, and just that, yeah, you're in this position now at University of Florida, and we want to talk about, like I said, sort of the interfacing with AI and everything. But I wanted to kind of start, because this is starting to be kind of like a curiosity, because I think we're kind of at this juncture, enough time since sort of this like more popular emergence of AI as a sort of companion and support tool. What has been your learning journey with AI?
Interestingly, my journey started, I'd say, probably around 2018, so about 7 years ago. And I know AI really took off in the news with ChatGPT around 2022. But the fact of the matter is, we've known about machine learning, adaptive learning platforms, automation in education for several years now. And I started off really just doing some research, being curious, being a lifelong learner, and looking and saying, what's coming next in higher education? What's going to impact us? What are, of course, technologies? I run an online program. Technologies is always front of mind for me. I want to constantly know what's going on and explore the tools that can make teaching and learning better. So I was doing that, and the pandemic hit. And you would think, because we all shifted online, that AI and tech adoption really escalated. For me, it slowed down because we had such an influx of students into our program. Everybody was stuck at home and everybody wanted to study. We also had marketing campaigns and other things hit at the same time. So we quadrupled our enrollment up to almost 1,000 students during the pandemic. So I unfortunately had about a year or two where I didn't get to do much research on AI, and I think other people too. We were all just kind of scrambling to deliver our classes for our students. After the pandemic, we really started to see more tools arrive. We were already using things like Grammarly or Otter AI to take notes for us in our meetings. A lot of us experimenting with that, but people didn't necessarily label those tools as AI. Grammarly today is pushing, hey, we're AI first. Everything's informed by AI. They weren't necessarily sharing that information or talking in that language because it wasn't necessarily of interest, or people didn't have the awareness of AI. So really after that, since 2022, I've been continuing that research, taking training on my own. University of Florida has been great. Once, AI really started to join the public conversation, they quickly launched 4 training courses for all faculty and staff that we could learn about AI. We have one of the largest AI supercomputers in the world located on campus. So we're really AI first. And we're really trying to figure out how to not only incorporate it into the curriculum and integrate it into our teaching and learning, but how we serve students, our student success numbers. Like, how can we track students so we can reach out to them in a timely way? Do we reach out to them manually? Do we leverage AI to analyze the student experience? So there's a lot of opportunities. And right now in 2025, as we're speaking, it's really about identifying opportunities, but also figuring out how we're going to establish these ethical guidelines around AI use. So it's not just, hey, we want to use it, but hey, we want to use it in the right way for the right reasons, in a manner that's consistent with our morals and education.
Couple of great pieces there. Like, one, just sort of the acknowledgement that like AI and sort of like the bits and pieces or sort of the precursors like being around for a while before sort of the emergence of ChatGPT and everything. It helps with sort of like the reticence or the skepticism or sort of this like boogeyman aspect of this thing that just came out of nowhere and is like totally reshaping the entire world or whatever. It's like, aspects of it were kind of filtering into our lives prior to that. So I think that helps to like lower the temperature a little bit. What I'm kind of taking away from what you're saying of your own learning journey is that was like, obviously indicative of like what you shared about your background, like lifelong learner, really embracing, all of that. But then I guess being, especially with what you were saying about UF, like, at a place that has a culture that maybe is sort of like nurturing this, facilitating it, creating opportunities to be curious and learn and sort of, maybe do that in community or whatever else. But I think, there are people where like I would imagine, say you were at some other organization, you probably still would be the lifelong learner and kind of following your curiosity, whatever. But I think trying to kind of know that people are going to be at various places on each of those spectrums of like, their own kind of personal curiosity or skepticism, and then being at a place that's going to be on a sort of sliding scale of like, how much are they sort of like opening windows and doors and, spaces and places and opportunities to just learn and develop with, sort of understanding AI, how it works, how it can be used, all the different kind of tools and everything. But I'll break this kind of next portion up about like, that idea of like incorporating AI into how we teach, but then also what we're teaching about, and how do we teach about AI and, its impacts on society, whatever else. So we'll start on like how you are seeing, your current institution or other institutions or whatever else. Are they or should they incorporate AI into how they teach?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great point. I see AI as both a tool and a topic. So it's something that we're going to use in the course development. We're going to use it in the course delivery and eventually maybe even in the course assessment. But we're also teaching in my field in communications how AI is impacting the profession, the way the work is done, the individuals as well. So we also want to make sure we incorporate it into the curriculum as a topic. It's really started for us in course development. Course development is a great place for us to start because we are constantly building, redeveloping, refining our courses. And we want to take tools that perhaps can be used across our entire program or individual tools that will benefit a course or a specific activity that is going on within a course. So having our instructional design team educated first and foremost in AI is important. So some of the ways we've used it specifically in our online courses, we have a certain structure where we design each module. And for the purpose of this conversation, let's say one module equals 1 week. So at the beginning of that module, we ask our faculties to write a module introduction. And sometimes they might give us like 2 or 3 sentences. This week, we're going to talk about X. It's going to be a fun conversation. X is important for this reason. And that's really not thorough enough. It's not contextualizing for the student where they are in the learning journey, what they're doing. So we'll take what the instructor writes and we'll take perhaps content from the module before, from that module, from the next module. We'll feed all that into ChatGPT and we'll ask it and we'll say, we need you to write a module introduction. We want it to do the following. And of course, prompt engineering is super important. So how do we put into it what we want to get out? We have specifications that we've always been telling our faculty. This module introduction should explain to the student what they learned last week, how that relates to what they're going to learn this week, and how that's going to build onto what they're going to learn next week. We'll talk about the importance of it. We'll talk about how it's situated in the bigger conversation. We'll talk to students then about what specifically they're going to do that week to learn the material for that week. So you can imagine it's a pretty powerful section if you write it and deliver it to the students in a well thought out, very clear, very organized manner. And we have the content, we have the information. The faculty have made a stab at it, and we've fed all this other information in, and we've been getting back beautiful drafts. I won't say final, final products that we'll use, but we're getting back nice drafts. And then our instructional designer with our faculty can review those drafts and decide, hey, we'll use this, we'll take that out, we'll do our own edits. And it has taken a little bit of more time because we're not just taking what the faculty member originally delivered to us and going with that. So there is a time factor involved here, but we're ending up with a much better product. And I tell faculty, if we end up with a better product, if students understand what they're doing that week or what you're asking for in the assignment, they're probably delivering a better assignment. So your grading is going to be that much easier. So I try and talk to the faculty about where the work and where the effort has to come in and where the payoffs for them will be. For the students also, we do something called alignment. It's based on Quality Matters standards, they're a nonprofit who focus on online course design. And, basically with them, what they're saying is we need instructional resources, learning outcomes for the module, learning outcomes for the course. Everything needs to align. And basically that means if you're reading about X, you have a goal to learn about X, and you're gonna show us an assessment that you learned about X. Because sometimes those things become disconnected. I'm sure we've all been in a class where we read something and then we took a test and we're like, wait a minute, nothing I read was on the test. And that's a disconnection of alignment. So that's all very manual and very human centric. And now we can take all of that information and put it in the chat GPT and ask it to check for alignment and train it with our questions to do that. So lots of opportunities for faculty to work in course development. There's also opportunities for faculty to integrate it, as I said, into the curriculum. We recently had a situation with a faculty member who's teaching a public relations course, and she reached out to us a little upset. And she wasn't understanding why in her public relations class we were teaching students how to identify the elements of a press release. We were teaching them how to read a press release and then identify the elements that they learned about in that press release. But they were not writing a press release. And the instructor was very upset. This is a disservice to the students. I don't understand. They're not writing a press release. And what she didn't know was we're actually writing the press release in the next class that's coming after her. So what we can do in this case is she's saying to us, okay, I'm going to focus on the deconstruction of this. How am I going to introduce that to students? How am I going to help them identify different elements and tell them if it's good or not? And she created a little AI tool, actually. And what it did was it identified the elements. It tested on the elements. It showed samples. It provided information of what was right and what was wrong. It referred back to, different instructional materials that were being used. And in that instance, the AI almost becomes a co-instructor, if you will, that the instructor has changed the computer system to assist it in the delivery and assessment of those materials. So I've seen it in many other ways as well. That's just one. Of course, it requires students to have access in some cases where we're going to ask them to use ChatGPT. That's another problem. Equity. ChatGPT is free. The pro version is not. Is it fair that some students can afford to pay for it and other students cannot? Probably not. That's not too equitable. University of South Carolina just made an arrangement, an agreement, partnership with OpenAI, and all students at the University of South Carolina starting this fall will have access to the paid version of ChatGPT. And that's awesome. That's leveling the field for all students. And those are the types of initiatives that the faculty and the administrators need to be thinking about. And we need to move from this place where we're scared of AI into a place where we're embracing, experimenting, and really trying to move ourselves and our programs forward with the technology.
Thankfully, I feel like, a lot of the sort of like sky is falling kind of like, I feel like that at least in like the zeitgeist isn't there as much anymore. Cause I think like we're seeing some good examples of how to sort of, bring AI in a sort of, measured, intentional way. And we did a recent episode on a bit more of sort of the assessment piece of sort of courses, like how it can be kind of a companion and assistant with helping students and faculty kind of have some more kind of collaboration and transparency and everything. So I appreciate that you kind of got into more of the course development piece, because a lot of what you were saying makes me think a lot about sort of in the world of marketing and some of the things I'm more familiar with, where you'd want to have like a really clear and useful style guide. Like, all right, for our company, like this is the stuff, like what it looks like when we're writing our voice and, whatever else, and similarly, like you'd want to have like, a certain level of consistency with knowing sort of best practices around like course development and everything. And I think AI and that sort of kind of companion and assistant and everything being able to sort of provide that a little bit more efficiently, that consistency and kind of checking your work and whatever else, because you're sort of embedding all this sort of knowledge in it of sort of like, this is the example of like what we want you to kind of strive towards, and now we're going to be giving you stuff and you kind of check against that and kind of do that. So I think just that idea of like you're saying, like in some ways there's maybe like more steps, but you know that there's more consistency, the language is more clear, you're getting higher quality student responses on the assignments, or kind of higher comprehension, and even just the like kind of coherent kind of kind of learning experience for the students, that that like what you're learning now is sort of feeding into the exam that you're taking, which builds to the next course or whatever, like that you can kind of maybe even just kind of check yourself against that, versus like you keep creating like each module in a vacuum and each course in a vacuum, and you're not maybe kind of having a broader awareness. But yeah, I mean, I think that is such like an important foundation. I like the way that you kind of captured it in that way. It's sort of these ripple effects of like, if you're building that one module really well, it's really, just every kind of piece after that is going to be that much more pleasant, for the student, but then like more effective for what the learning outcomes they're trying to achieve and everything. So that idea of the way you're talking about it, like, oh, it's kind of like, it's like a teaching assistant, or it's like a sort of curriculum design assistant or something. Like, it's just there to sort of help scaffold and sort of help like put some bumpers, on just sort of like, we're trying to do this, like we can do it, but like we're human, we're probably going to make mistakes. So we should at least have a way that we can kind of check our work in a really efficient and effective way. So I don't know if you want to kind of expand on that, because I think you were getting on sort of both sides of the coin of like, the how we teach and what we teach about kind of thing. But like, I guess just anything else in that idea of like, that this is something that is sort of the companion, it's the co-pilot, it's the assistant, it's sort of, augmenting the work, but then we're teaching about it at the same time. Cause like I've seen that where it's like, yeah, we're using the tool, but it also helps to build AI literacy because you're using the tool, because sort of like being like kind of meta about like, oh, I want to see your work. I want to see the prompts that you use to like submit this assignment that, maybe, isn't about AI and, and so the concepts it's covering. But take what you will, I guess, of just sort of expanding on like the sort of augmenting assistant part of all of this, or just if there's anything else that you want to speak on, I guess, if any good examples of sort of like, how we're teaching about AI and its impacts on different industries and things.
Really using AI as a co-producer of course development along with the instructional designers. Yeah, it's interesting. There was recently a article in the news about a student from Northeastern University who demanded a tuition refund because she had noticed that her faculty member had used AI to develop some of the course materials. It's interesting that that case is going on and that student has a view that they were cheated, or the assumption that the faculty member wasn't an expert, or that they were being lazy because they just had AI do their work for them. And I don't know what the faculty member did in this particular case, but from my experience, it's the exact opposite. It doesn't mean anything negative about the faculty member or their capabilities. And in fact, if you have a faculty member who cares enough to really make sure that the wording is fine-tuned to the point that the student has a greater chance of success, I would argue that's in favor of the student, that they should be excited that the faculty member is using AI so that they get clear information delivered and clear instructions and expectations of what their assessments are. So that's a little kind of example of, yeah, we're adopting it, but not everybody's on the same page. Not everybody understands these things. And, we have moved, as you say, from this AI running at us a million miles an hour and feeling overwhelmed and having this FOMO that everybody knows more than me, and I'm missing the boat. I think people, yes, as you said, have calmed down about that. I think that's great. And it's allowing us to teach AI, so it's allowing us to get students' minds open a little bit more, and also to be able to set guidelines and have important conversations with them about ethics, about why we do things a certain way. Also, teach them about when they use AI to, let's say, write a paper. You're not going to take the prompt, or you shouldn't take the prompt, put it into AI and say, write me a 500-word essay, and copy and paste and hand that in. That is cheating. But if we teach the students to write their own draft, and then come up with questions. How is my grammar? Where identify grammar mistakes? Do this, do that. I do this with my son. My son's in college, and he will write a draft, and then I will edit it for him and send him back comments. And it's funny, when he was in high school, I used to like, he'd send it to me and I'd rewrite the whole paper and say, hand it in, and I'd see what grade I got. Um, in college, we don't do that. And he's very honest. And he says to me, Dad, I don't want you to write it. I need to learn, show me what I did wrong. And why does it need to come to Dad? Like, granted, I love it. He's got the benefit of a dad who's got a PhD, who works in higher education, who has the ability to do this. But not everybody has that. Not everybody has a dad. Not everybody has a dad who's capable of providing the feedback. So now AI can be that companion for the students, but it's only if us as teachers and educators open that door and we allow that to happen. And when we open the door, we need to do so in a cautious way. We can't just know that everybody's going to be honest, but we can set things like, everybody heard about the teacher who put a line in their syllabus or in their question that was the same color as the background, so you couldn't visually see it. But then when the AI came back with the prompt on the essay, it had content, so they knew that AI had generated it. I'm not talking about catching students with guidelines, but giving them the guidelines to say, yes, you can use AI. You can use it in this way, but not in that way. It can be a co-producer. It can be a brainstorming colleague with you. I do it too. If I'm working on a project as an administrator and in the other part of my role where I'm not being a faculty member, yeah, I'm constantly using AI to test, to ideate, to figure out what I can do best and where I can focus most of my energy. So, really giving students the education of how to use it, how to be critical of the information. Even reading something, I've noticed in my testing, I'll get back a lot of facts that should be cited but are not cited. So I'll know enough and I'll say, hey, this is an interesting sentence. What is the source? And then it'll give me the source. Then I can go and look it up and say, is this actually a credible source? Is this, properly used? Whatever the questions I may have about it. We need to teach our students to do those things as well. So partnership with AI from the faculty perspective and from the student perspective, great. I think that's really where we need to be going.
All right, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. Forsyth Technical Community College was juggling siloed systems, fragmented data pipelines, and manual workflows across marketing, admissions, and CRM operations. Then they deployed Bolt Agents, Element 451's AI workforce platform. The result? These agents handled over 80% of student inquiries independently, saving 183,060 human minutes, and cutting call volumes by 14% within just 1 week of rollout. Curious what your AI teammates could look like? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents. Yeah, well, I think it's a great kind of call out of like you said, it's like, oh, it's, good on the faculty for, using AI, or at least like making an attempt. They're trying to start somewhere. It's something I always say of like, if you're trying to innovate or make change or, do whatever, it's like, start somewhere and then kind of, reflect and, kind of improve and keep that kind of continuous cycle going. But I think, yeah, like transparency is really important. What's resonating with me is the idea of like, you would hope that, a faculty could be a mentor here, sort of model the way and be kind of a role model to students and, embed it in, their course expectations, like you're saying, of like, use it this way, not that way. Because I think otherwise, if you're just being super prohibitive, my impression, I guess, of like, you kind of put me to task on it kind of thing is like that I think that you would be ending up creating delinquency. Students are going to use it even if you're like, no, don't do this thing. It's like, okay, like, can we really prevent them from doing it? Likely not. And I think clear expectations, clear reasoning for those expectations, and I think that can go a long way. And then like the sort of like mentorship and kind of role modeling. And then I know fellow Enrollify network host Jamie Hunt, as they're recording this episode, sent out an email about this post that she had put out about the student on Reddit being like, oh my God, college is cooked because like they did this assignment that was supposed to take like 90 minutes. It took them a minute to just get something on ChatGPT. And it's sort of speaking to the idea of like, that idea of, I think where, I think it's really powerful to give the reasoning around why we are setting expectations for AI in the way that we are, is that there's just the inauthenticity of just making AI do everything for you. It is technically cheating, but the idea of like, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're basically like, atrophying, the muscle memory, in your brain and everything else of like being able to be nimble and flexible and responsive, because it's just, you can't be like, asking a question in a work meeting and be like, hold on, let me just, ask this. It's like you are expected to just kind of intuitively know certain things about like how to do your job or, whatever else. So I think it's those sort of things I think that will hopefully resonate with folks of like, like we want you to put this in your own words. We want to know that you know it and all of that. And, hopefully that, kind of culture shift will permeate. And I know there's, it's a whole other podcast episode, I guess, of speaking of the current pressures and sort of stresses of college students, of why they would even go that route to just like, try to be so efficient with their assignments and everything. But as we start to wind down, I'm curious, just, we're speaking a lot about, I think, just sort of the current moment here, but from your vantage point, what do you see on the horizon for how AI will integrate with teaching and learning kind of, in the near future?
I'll start by tying it into that Reddit student. The fact that the student could take a prompt, throw it in the chat GPT, have the assignment done in 1 minute, certainly goes back to the things we've already discussed about ethics and training. But it goes back to the faculty member, and the faculty member should be considering what types of assessments they are using and how easy it is to potentially cheat. So maybe we do fewer papers. Maybe we do more reflection journals that are personalized. Maybe we do more learning portfolios. One of the things that will kind of stagnate growth in the future is we can only go as fast and far as our faculty are trained and knowledgeable in AI. And, that's difficult. Traditionally, many faculty members will go through bachelor's, master's, PhD, and then they're showing up at college and told, go teach with no teacher training. And we're kind of doing the same thing with AI. Go integrate AI, go teach AI. And there's, some training, but how many people are really upskilling? How many people are really focused on that? How many people are aware of, all of the topics that we've been discussing? So there's a lot of movement and a lot of ground to be gained here from faculty. I think in the future, that's going to be incredibly important. Some other things, faculty definitely need to talk about AI with the students now. And I think at the beginning of every class, they need to say, here are the expectations, here are the standards for this class. Every faculty member is probably going to have different expectations and standards. So it's clear to make sure that we're transparent to students with those, so they understand what they can and can't do. And we need to honestly say to them, if you're cheating yourself, right? We need to explain how the teaching and learning process and how this is putting a barrier in that in some cases if you're not using it properly. So, redesigning those assessments, talking with your students, adding ethics and equity as part of those conversations. I think that students don't necessarily understand the ethics or even have a different ethical outlook than some of the older generation that may be teaching them. So, having those conversations, talking about that, the power of technology and how we're going to leverage it. And it's also important to have those conversations. I think faculty need to more than ever be connected with those professions their students are going into and listening to those who are in the profession and understanding how they're using AI. Because if I'm graduating students who are going into the communications field and they're showing up at work and they don't know how to use AI, but everybody else there is, that's a problem for me. I'm not educating students well enough. So we need to know what's going on in those workplaces so we can come back and integrate that back into the classroom. So it's not just about what we want. It is about understanding where the students will need certain skills and making sure we do that. So having those conversations, more important than ever.
Certainly that idea of you could look at this as a challenge or an opportunity, just depending on your perspective. But, as the eternal optimist, it is such a great opportunity to use this as a catalyst and a good reason to rethink what you're teaching and how you're teaching it. So certainly a lot of work to be done. And we will close with our usual question here. As we kind of synthesize all this together, folks are going out on their ways after this episode. What advice would you want to leave people with, other higher ed leaders navigating this moment?
I think the two key words here for AI are be curious. And that's really all we need from faculty at this point is be curious about AI. how does it work? How can you use it? How can you use it in your teaching? How can students use it in their careers? Where have we been? Where are we now? And where are we going? If we think about the classic diffusion of innovations, we are very early stages of adoption and implementation of AI in the grand scheme of things. And people need to remember that and don't feel pressured to integrate things, but feel that you now have an opportunity. And it really is an amazing opportunity. How lucky are we that we live at this moment in history that we are going to take part in and experience such a fundamental change in work and education that it is not something we should shy away from. It is something we should embrace because it is going to be happening. And let's not get left behind. So be curious, ask questions, learn. That will benefit you and everybody down the line from you that you speak with.
Yeah, great words to kind of leave us on. And I think it's just like, it's a good sort of geeky energy here. I think I always love when folks are just bringing kind of their earnest and authentic passion to these conversations and looking at things as just sort of these, great opportunities and everything. And I think, hopefully folks are feeling motivated and inspired by your words and everything that you shared. We'll have ways to connect with you in the show notes and everything. So just thank you so much for all that you do and for hanging out for this episode.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly in your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.